Hello, my friend. We are continuing our journey into the world of survival engineering, the secret knowledge of the Lakota and Cheyenne nations, who turned ice and wind into allies. Close your eyes, listen to the crackle of the small fire in the center of the cone, and feel the dry warmth of the air against your skin. You are inside the ultimate fortress, the teepee, a machine perfected by millennia. But the hidden magic of the teepee was also inside. You and your tribe often dug a narrow channel, a blower which started outside, passed under the walls, and led directly to the central hearth. Fresh air flowed through it, feeding the fire with precious oxygen. Thanks to this subtle design, the warm zone in the center was easily maintained, and the smoke did not spread across the floor, as often happens in ordinary tents. The fire burned cleaner, smoldered more evenly, gave off more heat, and produced significantly less smoke. This ingenious air duct would play a huge role in the survival of many modern tourists who still suffer in smoky tents, not understanding why traditional engineers dealt with this problem so elegantly. The location of the hearth inside the teepee was also not accidental, but a result of deep observation. It was placed slightly closer to the entrance rather than strictly in the geometric center. This took into account the slope of the poles, the natural direction of air currents, and the height of the cone. The smoke rose as if it were moving through a tunnel, sliding along the inner surface of the fabric and going up without touching the people sitting in the back, the place of honor. In large teepees, the hearth could be moved just a little bit, but that slight adjustment changed the ventilation dramatically. Everything was thought out, tested by generations, and perfected. Fuel was no less important than the airflow itself. For night heating, dry, dense woods were used, which produced a lot of charcoal and almost no smoke. Wet logs were strictly forbidden from being thrown directly into the fire at night. They were meticulously dried on a wooden grate suspended above the hearth, where the gentle heat turned the moisture into steam before they could be used. Choosing the right firewood was part of survival and part of domestic craftsmanship, a lesson taught from childhood. Smoke inside a teepee was considered a sign of carelessness, even a minor shame. Clean air was a source of pride for the family, and smoke was a source of embarrassment. A good host always kept a vigilant eye on the ears of the smoke vent, the fire itself, the firewood supply, and the bellows. It was an active, the living system that required attention and care, much like tending a pet or a garden. That is why the teepee was not merely a house, not just a shelter from the wind and cold, but a meticulously designed machine created to convert fuel into heat and comfort with minimal loss. It was the perfect balance of fire and air, thick fabric and wind, technical skill and observation. Where modern tourists might suffocate from smoke in their tents, ancient peoples lived for years without experiencing even half of the problems we consider inevitable. If you enjoy learning about such amazing technical solutions of the past and how people have turned nature into an ally for millennia, please leave a gentle like. This will help us to create even more stories about the craftsmanship, engineering, and deep survival knowledge of ancient peoples. What if I told you that the floor of a teepee was not just dirt, but a complex engineering map and the foundation of all comfort? The distribution of sleeping places inside the dwelling was never random, but obeyed the strict laws of thermodynamics and the tribe's social hierarchy. The warmest and most honorable place was at the back of the teepee, directly opposite the entrance and behind the hearth. This is where the head of the family slept, receiving maximum radiant heat from the fire and minimum accidental drafts from the door. People always slept with their feet toward the fire, forming a kind of human sun or circle around the heat source. This had a profound physiological meaning. If the feet are warm, the whole body feels comfortable. Blood circulation quickly carries heat from the warm feet to the rest of the body, maintaining overall core temperature. In addition, this radial arrangement allowed people to jump up quickly in case of danger without disturbing one another. The earth and floor was never left bare, as the earth is an excellent conductor of cold, capable of draining the life and warmth out of a sleeping person in hours. It was covered with a thick layer of dry grass, branches of sagebrush or willow twigs. This natural mattress created an essential air layer that insulated people from the frozen ground below. Sage also gave off a pleasant aroma and helped to repel insects if they woke up from the heat. Thick bison hides were laid on top of the plant bedding. With the fur side up, bison fur has unique properties that trap warm air between the fibers, acting as millions of tiny, natural insulation bubbles. The result was a soft and incredibly warm carpet that you could walk on barefoot even in freezing temperatures. It was the basis of comfort, turning the earthen floor into a warm, safe bed. For sleeping, they used specially designed sleeping bags sewn from the thickest winter hides. Often, several people slept together under one large skin, warming each other with their collective body heat. Shared warmth was an important communal resource that could never be neglected. On the coldest nights, loyal dogs were also allowed inside, becoming living hot water bottles nestled next to the family. The space closest to the walls was systematically used to store belongings, supplies, and tools. These bundles and boxes created an additional insulating barrier around the perimeter. The cold that managed to penetrate the outer wall and the inner lining was met with a protective barrier of personal belongings. In this way, the living space was protected by several layers of defense. The places closer to the exit were considered the coldest and were usually reserved for less prominent family members or temporary guests. If there was not enough space, firewood was also stored there so that it could be quickly thrown into the fire without stepping over sleeping people. The logistics of movement inside were designed to minimize heat loss. An important detail was the door threshold, which was deliberately made high so that cold air would not flow inside along the floor. The entrance was covered with a heavy skin, often weighted with a heavy wooden plank at the bottom. It fit tightly to the edges, acting as an airtight airlock. All this created zones of different temperatures inside the teepee, and everyone instinctively knew their place in the system. The cozy microclimate was the result of collective effort, disciplined behavior, and the proper organization of space. The teepee was not just a room, but a complex, carefully calibrated machine for sleeping and resting. In the next chapter, you will learn how ordinary snow, which we modern people consider a source of cold, was ingeniously used to insulate walls. Winter on the Great Plains brought tons of snow, but instead of fighting it, the Indians turned it into their greatest ally. Snow, which consists mostly of air trapped between ice crystals, is one of the most excellent natural insulators known. The inhabitants of the teepee used this unique property to create an additional external barrier for their dwellings. As soon as the first steady snow fell, it was deliberately raked to the base of the teepee, forming a high mound around the entire perimeter. This snow belt could reach up to a meter in height and reliably close the gap between the ground and the outer cover. It effectively blocked any low drafts that could penetrate under the skins. In essence, the teepee received an additional foundation made of snow. Inside the dwelling, between the outer skin and the inner lining, dry grass or hay was sometimes stuffed into this narrow space. Combined with the outer snow wall, this created a sandwich panel with incredible thermal insulation properties. The cold could not penetrate the snow and grass from below, and the double wall stopped it from above. This technique was simple, but extremely effective. The snow wall also pressed the edge of the teepee cover firmly to the ground, taking the structural load off the pegs in strong winds. This was an additional guarantee that the teepee would not be blown away or torn. The snow that melted slightly from the heat coming from inside would then freeze, forming a solid ring of protective ice. The dwelling literally froze into the landscape, becoming a stable monolith. However, it was crucial to ensure that the snow did not touch the inner lining and did not soak it. For this purpose, special woven mats or willow frames were used as a protective barrier. Controlling humidity in such a structure was a delicate art. Wet insulation ceases to work, so the condition of the snow wall was constantly monitored. Interestingly, snow was also used as a primary source of water when the rivers froze too deeply or were inaccessible. Clean, fresh snow was melted in cauldrons over the fire to obtain drinking water without having to leave the warmth of the dwelling. This saved enormous energy and precious calories that would have been spent on a trip to the ice hole. Winter life was meticulously optimized for energy conservation. This masterful use of natural materials made the teepee an organic part of the landscape. It did not oppose nature, but was perfectly integrated into it. People did not try to heat the street air. They created a tiny oasis of warmth, using the abundant resources of winter itself. In the spring, when the snow began to melt, the embankment was simply destroyed, and the water naturally drained into the ground without flooding the dwelling. If the location was chosen correctly, this seasonal architecture left no debris or traces behind. It was absolute environmental friendliness. Dictated by the necessity of survival, the use of snow as insulation is known to many northern peoples. But in the construction of the teepee, it was perfected into an art form. This allowed them to survive temperatures that killed unprepared travelers in a single, freezing night. Knowledge of the thermal properties of materials was the tribe's greatest asset. Snow retained heat. But what exactly provided that heat inside the dwelling when firewood was literally worth its weight in gold? In the next chapter, you will learn about the fuel that was literally lying at their feet, covering the vast open spaces, ready to learn an even more shocking truth about what it took to keep a fire going in the boundless prairie, where the horizon stretches forever to the sky and trees are as rare as rain in the desert. In the Great Plains, wood was a real luxury, a commodity more valuable than gold. It was found only in river floodplains and ravines, where cottonwoods and a few other species managed to grow. The rest of the immense space was covered with waves of grass that rustled beautifully in the wind, but were completely unsuitable for long-term burning. In such conditions, anyone who heated their hearth primarily with wood was considered either incredibly lucky or terribly wasteful. Therefore, indigenous peoples sought another primary source of energy, one that lay underfoot in abundance and was renewed naturally every season. You are, of course, talking about dried bison dung, which was so poetically called bison chips. This material was a real treasure for the inhabitants of the steppe. It dried evenly in the hot sun, became hard, light, and surprisingly clean when burned. Unlike wood, especially resinous coniferous wood, it did not produce sparks that could burn through the skin of the teepee and turn the dwelling into a fiery torch in a matter of minutes. Every single spark in such a house was an immediate threat to life. That is why bison chips were valued no less than the best types of wood. They smoldered gently, evenly for long hours, retaining heat even in the fiercest steppe winds. Preparing this amazing fuel was a science in itself, learned from childhood. In the fall, women and children meticulously collected the dried flatbreads, stacking them in tall, neat piles near their homes, like small, stable towers of warmth. Sometimes the chips were sorted by size. The smaller ones were used for kindling, the larger, denser ones for smoldering at night. This was the foundation of winter autonomy. Good, well-built reserves could determine whether a family would freeze to death in February or spend the winter in relative comfort. When real wood was finally obtained, usually cottonwood growing on riverbanks, it was treated with almost reverence and gratitude. Cottonwood had thick, sweet bark that horses enjoyed gnawing on in winter. The wood burned cleanly and for a long time without producing the acidic smoke that could fill a teepee in minutes and make people cough until they cried. That is why cottonwood was considered the best natural premium firewood available. Coniferous species were used rarely and reluctantly due to the high risk. The resinous chips shot embers, and each ember was a potential hole in the precious wall of the dwelling. Fuel economy was elevated to an art form, a discipline. Huge, roaring fires in teepees were strictly forbidden. They destroyed the delicate draft, created far too much smoke, and could damage the skin from which the walls were made. A small, compact fire, like the gentle heart of the house, was much more effective. It was always surrounded by carefully placed stones that heated up and became a kind of heat accumulator. Even when the fire was almost out, the stones continued to give off the accumulated heat for hours, maintaining a cozy, stable climate inside. Keeping watch over the hearth was considered a matter of honor and great responsibility. Often this task was performed by elderly people or those who woke up easily at night. Their job was to keep the fire from going out and, crucially, to prevent it from growing too large. It was very important to maintain the right level of smoldering, one that did not require waking up every hour to add fuel. An experienced person knew precisely how to keep the sleeping fire going until dawn. In the morning, it was enough to throw in a couple of dry branches or lumps of fuel to rekindle it as if it had never gone out. The fuel supplies themselves were carefully stored in a dry place, usually in bags or woven baskets near the entrance. This not only protected them from destructive snow, rain, or ice, but also allowed you to quickly get the right amount of chips or firewood if the weather suddenly worsened. Every unit of fuel was considered valuable. Everything was stockpiled, from good firewood to small, dry pieces of manure suitable for kindling. Lighting a fire was another important, almost ritualistic skill. They used tinder made from dried grass, tinder fungus, or finely shaved bark. The flint and steel were kept in a separate, specially treated bag, carefully protected from all moisture. Losing a flint in winter was a disaster, a near-death sentence, because without it, it was incredibly difficult to start a fire. It was like losing control of your own life. Sometimes, before going to bed, the coals were deliberately covered with a thin layer of ash. This created a kind of heat incubator, a protective blanket. In the morning, it was enough to lightly rake the ashes and let air in, and the coals would come back to life as if breathing. This method was called the sleeping fire and was used everywhere across the plains. It saved both precious fuel and vital energy. This complex strategy, honed over countless years, allowed families to live for weeks and months with virtually no dependence on wood and without suffering from the cold. They used what the prairie generously provided: bison, sun, wind, and profound knowledge of nature. They turned animal waste into the very foundation of their civilization, into warmth without which life in the harsh climate would have been simply impossible. In the next chapter, you will learn what happened in the teepee when darkness fell, how the distribution of responsibilities changed, how they prepared for bed, and what small, yet vital rituals maintained family life in the harsh, isolated conditions of the steppe. At sunset, the teepee turned into a true fortress. Living by the strict, disciplined laws of wartime, night was universally the most dangerous time of day. The frost intensified its grip, and predators and human enemies could take silent advantage of the darkness. Therefore, sleep in a teepee was never a completely relaxed rest. It was a state of alert anticipation, a half-sleep. The door was securely locked from the inside with a system of sticks and cords that could not be opened silently from the outside. Inside, someone was always awake or sleeping very lightly. Usually, it was the women who kept a vigilant eye on the fire, and the children. If a child uncovered itself in its sleep, it was immediately covered again to prevent the slightest risk of hypothermia. Caring for the warmth of others was instinctive and automatic, a second nature. The men's weapons were always kept at hand, at the head of the bed: a bow, a quiver of arrows, a knife, or a tomahawk. Everything was ready for battle in a split second. Even in his deepest sleep, a warrior subconsciously controlled the space around him. This constant tension was the necessary price of family safety. In the middle of the wilderness, particular attention was paid to subtle sounds from outside. The thick walls of the teepee let sounds through, and experienced ears could easily distinguish the crunch of snow under a wolf's paw from human footsteps. Any unusual sound instantly woke the inhabitants. Silence was considered the best and most reliable guard. Dogs, which often slept inside or at the entrance, served as living alarms. Their reaction to external stimuli was the first, most crucial warning sign. In addition, the warm bodies of the dogs helped to keep people warm, creating a perfect symbiosis of safety and comfort. If a storm began, the men immediately checked the reliability of the poles and the tension of the skins. In case of extreme wind, they could even add their own weight by holding on to ropes or poles to physically hold the dwelling in place. The struggle for the house could last all night, a silent battle against the elements. The psychological climate inside was as important as the physical one. In the cramped confines of the enclosed space, people learned to be inconspicuous and to profoundly respect each other's boundaries. Conflicts were nipped in the bud, as quarrels could quickly destroy the fragile balance of survival. The night was also a sacred time for quiet conversations and the transfer of knowledge. The elders told legends, explaining natural phenomena and the history of the tribe. With the howling wind outside, these stories were particularly poignant and powerful, shaping the worldview of the young. The morning began long before dawn. The women were always the first to get up to stoke the fire and heat the water. By the time the men woke up, the tepi should already be pleasantly warm. This steady rhythm of life had remained unchanged for centuries. Safety at night was ensured not by thick walls of stone, but by the relentless vigilance and perfect unity of the family. The tepi was a living organism where everyone performed their essential function for the common good. It was indeed warm inside the tepi, but this warmth felt fundamentally different from that in modern apartments, where radiators heat indiscriminately. There was no overheated, dry air in the tepi. There was a soft, living warmth emanating from a small fire and the heated skins of the walls. Therefore, clothing was not just part of the wardrobe, but a second, personal layer of the dwelling, a personal mini-tepi that everyone wore constantly. To take everything off, as is customary in our homes with central heating, would be not only strange, but extremely dangerous. People only took off their heaviest fur cloaks, thick moccasins, and outer capes, leaving on their tunics, leggings, and soft inner layers of finely crafted suede. Suede was the ideal material for nightwear and homewear. It combined softness with durability, breathed well, and protected the body from sudden, dangerous temperature changes. The leather protected against drafts, which sometimes penetrated the tepi due to the wind or the air currents at the ears of the smoke vent. In such practical pajamas, you could not only sleep comfortably, but also instantly run outside in case of danger, enemy attacks, wild animals, or emergencies, and not freeze even if it was 40 degrees below zero outside. Feet required special, constant attention. At night, they wore special sleeping moccasins. Soft, wide, often lined with fur. It was a kind of shoe version of a blanket. They did not restrict blood circulation, and the dry grass that was sometimes placed inside acted as a natural insulator, providing additional dryness and warmth. The people of the Great Plains knew a simple, undeniable truth. Frozen feet meant a painful night, and no amount of skin could save you if your body couldn't properly warm your limbs. The main element of bedding was bison skins, or robes. Winter bison skins with their thick undercoat were a true masterpiece of natural insulation. In terms of their ability to retain heat, they surpassed many modern materials. The fur not only kept you warm, it created a dense, cozy capsule around you, an almost invisible cocoon of safety. Pressing the fur against your body, you felt as if the bison itself was guarding you in your sleep, keeping the cold at a respectful bay. Children were covered especially carefully, a non-negotiable rule. Babies were wrapped in whole skins, sometimes leaving only their tiny noses exposed to the air. Infants were placed in cradles lined with soft moss, which acted as a natural diaper, insulator, and absorbent all at once. The moss absorbed moisture so that the child's skin remained dry and warm, which was essential for health and survival in the harsh climate. Such meticulous care saved the lives of dozens of generations. Drying clothes before bed was another important part of the evening ritual. Clothes saturated with sweat after a long day of traveling, hunting, or working on the farm could become a deadly trap if worn while wet. Therefore, outer clothing, gloves, leggings, and sometimes even moccasins were hung on special poles closer to the top of the tepi. This was where the warmest and driest air naturally gathered. By morning, everything was dry, becoming not just warm, but slightly heated, perfect for starting a new day with restored energy. Hair, which was long and thick for many, was braided or tucked under leather headbands at night. This not only prevented tangling but also helped to keep the head warm. Personal care did not stop, even in the harsh conditions of the steppe. It was part of the culture, self-respect, and general discipline. If the cold intensified dramatically, they switched immediately to winter mode, adding extra layers of clothing. The principle of layering, so popular among modern tourists, had been used here effectively for centuries. Several light layers created air pockets that retained heat better than one heavy layer. Those who lived in teepees intuitively understood aerodynamics and thermodynamics much better than many modern people. Each item had its own value, its own soul, and its own story. The clothing was the result of long and painstaking work by women who tanned the hides by hand, making them soft, supple, and light. Each tunic and each pair of leggings was sewn precisely for a specific person and decorated with embroidery symbols and beads. It was a personal, wearable world that warmed not only the body but also the heart. As a result, the system of protection from the cold was a complex, well-thought-out complex structure, from the outer snow wall around the teepee to the innermost shirt. Each layer played its critical role. It did not just retain heat, it completely neutralized the cold, turning a seemingly fragile dwelling made of skins into an amazingly effective winter survival machine. Waking up in a teepee in winter is a special ritual that requires deep willpower and practiced, efficient movements. During the night, the fire usually burned down to embers, and the temperature inside would naturally drop, although it remained significantly higher than outside. The hardest part was climbing out from under the thick, warm skins into the cool morning air. The first to wake up was the person responsible for the fire. His task was to quickly revive the flames before the others woke up completely. The gentle sound of the embers being fanned and the crackling of the first twigs was a welcome signal to the whole family that a new day had begun. As soon as the fire flared up, warmth instantly filled the small space of the cone, pushing back the cold. The second important task was to melt snow, or ice, for water. Morning drinks were essential to get the body going and hydrate. Hot herbal tea helped to warm up from the inside and provided immediate energy. Breakfast was simple and pragmatic, usually leftovers from yesterday's dinner or dried meat, pemmican. Then they started checking their essential gear. The men looked over their weapons and skis, while the women checked their supplies and clothes. Everything had to be ready to go. Winter days are painfully short, and they couldn't afford to waste any daylight hours. If snowdrifts had accumulated at the entrance overnight, they had to be cleared away. This was often done from the inside, pushing the snow out with the door curtain or a special shovel made of bison bone. Clearing the exit was essential for rapid safety. Inside the teepee, frost often formed on the poles above the inner lining in the morning. When the air warmed up, this frost could start to melt and drip onto the occupants. To prevent this from happening, it was necessary to manage the ventilation properly, gradually raising the temperature. This was also part of the morning routine. A delicate balance. Body care included rubbing with snow or washing with ice water for hardening and invigoration. Despite the extreme cold, cleanliness was strictly maintained. This invigorated the spirit and strengthened the immune system. The family discussed plans for the day in clear, concise communication. Who would go hunting? Who would stay in camp? What essential work needed to be done? Everyone understood their role perfectly. Mourning in the teepee was not a torment, it was a celebration of life. The very fact of waking up in warmth in the middle of a deadly winter was a small, profound victory. People greeted the sun with deep gratitude. As soon as the sun rose, life spilled out of the cone. Children played, adults worked. The teepee remained standing, silently waiting for its inhabitants to return in the evening to warm them again. Modern houses are anchored to the ground by heavy foundations, like anchors that keep them in one place for decades, but the true strength of the teepee lay in the opposite, in its complete independence from the landscape, in its radical ability to move with people rather than forcing people to adapt to it. In winter, when resources were rapidly dwindling, staying put meant condemning oneself to hunger and cold. firewood disappeared, game fled with the winds, and water could freeze over completely, the ability to dismantle one's entire home in a matter of minutes and take it to where there was life was not just a convenience, but a fundamental, non-negotiable law of survival. When it was time to move, the teepees were dismantled in a strict, well-rehearsed order, like a choreographed dance. Everything was done in reverse order of assembly. First, the outer skins were removed and carefully folded. Then, the inner linings were dismantled, and only then did they move on to the poles, which were gathered into even, balanced bundles. The lightness and overall thoughtfulness of the design was striking. The entire house was transformed into a compact set of parts that could be loaded onto a sled. These sleds, long forks made of the tepi poles themselves, were pulled by dogs or sturdy horses. Thus, the tepi became not just a dwelling, but also a transport container, a storage system, and an integral part of the general equipment. The house traveled with its owners, a faithful companion. The nomadic lifestyle left absolutely no room for hoarding or sentimentality. Every item had to be immediately useful. Otherwise, it was left behind, without regret. In the tepi, there was no such thing as an object kept simply for beauty or just in case. Everything had a fierce, practical value. From a cooking pot to a sewing needle, such intense minimalism was not a fashion, a philosophy, or a style as it is today. It was a harsh, unforgiving requirement of reality. Extra weight meant extra load on the animals, extra delay during the transition, and extra risk. Therefore, unnecessary clutter simply could not accumulate. Everything happened quickly at the new location. As soon as a place to camp was chosen, an almost choreographed process began. The women, who were the true engineers of the tepi, set up the dwelling in an astonishing 15 to 30 minutes. In winter, this speed was literally a matter of life and death. It was necessary to stretch the skins, build a fire, melt snow for water, and warm up the interior before darkness fell and the temperature plummeted. Several neighboring families working in perfect sync could set up an entire village in literally half an hour. Dozens of neat white cones suddenly appeared on an empty patch of steppe, each of which soon had a fire burning warmly inside. Choosing a place to spend the winter was a science in itself. Passed down through deep oral tradition, the ideal location was considered to be a lowland protected from the wind by hills, trees, or a river ravine. The availability of water, access to firewood, and sufficient space for the grazing animals were all critically important. A single mistake could lead to disaster. Too open a place meant icy, killing winds. Too damp a place meant disease, and a lack of fuel meant an inability to survive the cold. Therefore, the tribe's scouts usually explored the territory in advance and chose the best, safest locations for their camps. One of the striking features of the teepee was its inherent maintainability. If a pole broke, it was immediately replaced with a new one. If the skin tore, it was simply sewn up using sinew and a bone needle. The house was constantly being renewed and lived in, while remaining the same familiar, comforting dwelling. This architecture was not temporary or disposable. It was eternal in its flexibility and adaptability. Unlike modern tents, which become unusable due to a broken zipper or a cracked plastic pole and end up in a landfill, tepi materials served for years and then took on a new, useful form. An old hide could become clothing, moccasins, or craft material. Nothing was lost. Everything was turned into something useful and practical. This dwelling has proven its effectiveness over time, measured not in decades or centuries, but in millennia. The teepee has survived ice ages, dramatic climate shifts, massive animal migrations, wars, droughts, and winters that could have destroyed immobile civilizations. To call it primitive is to completely misunderstand its profound essence. It was a precisely calculated machine for autonomous living, in which every single detail worked with nature, not against it. Winter survival for indigenous peoples was not a continuous struggle, not a resistance to the elements. They did not try to defeat the cold. They learned to live in it, weaving themselves into its laws and using them to their advantage. The tepi, covered with skins warmed by a small fire and surrounded by a snow wall, was the ultimate result of this quiet wisdom. It allowed them not only to survive the winter, but to exist in it naturally, freely, and safely, maintaining perfect harmony with the surrounding world. We have examined the incredible structure of the tepi and understood that it is not just a piece of leather on sticks, but a complex, sophisticated engineering system encompassing ventilation, thermal insulation, and aerodynamics. All these fundamental principles were known and applied in practice long before the advent of physics textbooks. The warmth in the tepi was provided not by powerful heaters, but by a deep, innate understanding of nature and profound family unity, in conditions where a modern person with all their gadgets could die in a single day. Entire families with children and the elderly lived comfortably and safely. They turned the deadly cold into a normal, livable condition with which one can and must coexist. This is a powerful lesson for all of us. Comfort does not depend on the amount of technology you own, but on the ability to use what you have wisely and respectfully. What impressed you most about the winter tepi? Was it the invisible wall of the inner lining, the ingenious use of dried manure as perfect fuel, or the aerodynamic cone shape that laughed at the wind? Share your thoughts, Tiptuk. You are still in the world of the Lakota, breathing the clean, sage-scented air inside the cone. The fire is burning down to embers, the stones are radiating their stored heat, and the snow outside forms an impenetrable wall. You feel the gentle rise and fall of the bison robe covering you, the thick fur pressing into your skin, trapping your body heat perfectly. But even here, in the heart of the warmth, the ancient mind knows that true safety comes not from wood and hide, but from knowledge. The knowledge of how to read the clouds, how to track a bison through deep snow, and how to stay clean when water is frozen solid. The next secret of survival is the discipline of cleanliness itself. We are used to thinking of cleanliness as a comfort, a luxury, but for your people, it was a brutal requirement of survival. Disease and infection spread rapidly in cramped, cold conditions, and a simple cold could turn into a death sentence without access to modern medicine. Therefore, maintaining dryness and purity inside the tepi was a constant, non-negotiable task. The floor, covered with dried grass and sage, was regularly swept and refreshed. The old bedding was removed and burned, cleansing the space of pests and lingering odors. The fire, thanks to the perfect ventilation system, kept the air circulating and dry. This continuous dry airflow prevented the buildup of moisture, which is the natural enemy of warm clothing and healthy lungs. You and your family regularly brought all clothing and sleeping robes outside on sunny, cold days and shook them vigorously. The cold air, despite the temperature, acts as a natural disinfectant. The sun's UV rays, even in winter, helped kill bacteria. This routine was as important as hunting. Personal hygiene, however, presented a unique challenge. When the rivers were frozen solid, you could not take a warm bath. Instead, you relied on sweat lodges, the inipi, where steam and heat cleansed the body and spirit. But daily hygiene inside the tepi was simpler. You used snow, rubbing it vigorously over your skin, a quick, invigorating, and incredibly cold process that instantly strengthened the immune system and cleansed the pores. This was often followed by rubbing the skin with animal fat or oils, which provided a protective layer against the drying wind and cold, preventing chapping and frostbite. Your hair, long and thick, was often combed with combs made of bone or wood and then braided or oiled. Clean, healthy hair was a sign of a strong, respected person. The smell of cedar, sage, and sweet grass was burned daily in small amounts for both purification and air freshening. This fragrant smoke did not linger but was quickly sucked out by the ventilation system, leaving only the clean, sharp scent of the prairie. You intuitively understood that a clean body and a clean living space led to a clean, alert mind. Now, listen to the story of the tribe's greatest spiritual resource, the pipe, Chanunpa. The pipe was not merely for smoking, but a sacred object, a medium of connection with Wakan Tanka, the great mystery. In the deep of winter, when the world outside was silent and deadly, the pipe was brought out. The act of lighting it was a meticulous ritual. The stone bowl, often made of red pipestone, was filled with a mixture of tobacco and dried herbs like kinnikinnick. The smoke was offered in 4 directions: east, south, west, north, then to the sky and to Mother Earth. When the pipe was passed among the men, each took a breath of the sacred smoke, using it to clear his mind, to speak the truth, and to pray for the tribe's welfare. This ritual helped maintain mental health, providing a platform for respectful communication where conflicts could be voiced and resolved without the anger that could threaten survival. The pipe ensured unity. You sit cross-legged in the back of the tepi, waiting your turn. The silence is profound, broken only by the gentle sound of the fire and the elder's soft voice. You watch the smoke rise in a thin, straight column toward the smoke hole, a direct line between the center of the world inside your tent and the vast, cold sky. You feel connected to the millions of breaths taken before you, the spirits of your ancestors who built and slept in cones exactly like this, on land exactly like this, under skies exactly like this. This connection to the past, this historical memory, was your greatest weapon against the despair of winter. The stories told by the fire were not entertainment. They were lessons in geology, astronomy, animal behavior, and human behavior. The elder recounted the epic migration across the ice-free corridor, the first bison hunts, and the rules of honor that must never be broken. You listen, memorizing every detail, knowing that this oral library is the tribe's most valuable resource. The children, nestled in their robes, are absorbing the wisdom. They are learning the shape of the cone, the location of the fire, the sound of the wind, and the stories of the star people. They are taught that everything is connected. The bison gives its life so the human can live. The human must respect the bison, and the bison's skin is now the wall that protects them from the cold that killed the very animal. It is a perfect, inescapable cycle of gratitude and necessity. The nomadic life also required a different approach to time. In your modern life, time is linear, measured by clocks, appointments, and deadlines. But inside the teepee, time is circular. It is measured by the phases of the moon, the intensity of the cold, the movement of the herd, and the cycle of the stories. You don't measure the hour. You measure the hunger of the fire and the needs of the child. This mindset eliminates the stress of rushing and forces you to live fully in the present, a calm state, essential for survival. You see the importance of the tribe. Oyate. The tepi is a self-contained unit, but it cannot survive alone. The village is a cluster of cones, each facing the rising sun, each supporting the others. If one family's fire goes out, another immediately shares its coals. If one hunter is injured, the others bring meat to his family. This mutual reliance, born of extreme necessity, made the tribal structure unbreakable. You are not just a person. You are a thread in a tightly woven, life-giving fabric. The night deepens, and you hear the silence of the snow absorbing every sound. You are completely safe. The deep, warm sleep inside the tepi is a restoration of the mind and body, preparing you for the harsh light of the morning hunt. The cold outside is simply a fact, a condition that the perfectly designed structure has neutralized. You drift into a deep sleep, breathing the pure air filtered by the constant draft, your feet warm by the embers. You wake up to the gentle movement of your wife stoking the fire. Her movements are practiced and silent. The embers glow red instantly, and a thin wisp of smoke rises straight and true, proof that the smoke flaps are perfectly adjusted. The crackling sound of the first twigs is a gentle alarm clock for your body. You stretch, feeling the stiffness of the cold night leaving your muscles. The first task of the men is to check the environment. You put on your soft sleeping moccasins and carefully lift the heavy door flap. The air outside hits you with a sharp, clean shock, minus 30 degrees, but dry and clean. You see the high snow wall around the base of the tepi, solid and perfectly insulating. You inspect the snow for tracks, the paw prints of a curious fox, the small feet of a rabbit, but no large predators, no human enemies. The snow is your monitor, recording every passage of life in the night. The morning ritual of cleanliness begins. You take a handful of fresh, powdery snow and vigorously rub your face and chest. The shock is immediate, but invigorating. The blood rushes to your skin, making you feel warm and alive, a natural hardening against the cold. You drink hot water, melted from clean snow, before eating a small portion of pemmican, the condensed fuel of the prairie-dried meat, fat and berries, a perfectly balanced energy source. The women prepare the gear. You check your bow, the sinew tight and dry. You feel the smoothness of the stone arrowheads, sharpened to perfection. You put on your hunting clothes, layer upon layer of soft leather, leggings that protect your legs from the deep snow, and a heavy winter robe that acts as excellent camouflage against the pale winter background. You feel the strength returning, the focused intent of the hunter. The entire village begins to move in a synchronized rhythm. Smoke rises from dozens of cones, forming a light, temporary haze against the massive winter sky. The men gather, their breath clouding in the air, discussing the scouting report from the night before. They talk about the direction of the wind, the condition of the river ice, and the last known location of the bison herd. Decision-making is consensus-based, slow and careful, because a single mistake can cost lives. You leave the safety of the teepee, stepping out onto the snow. The wind hits your back, pushing you toward the east. The teepee, your machine of survival, is left behind. It is standing perfectly, waiting patiently. You know it will be there, warm and dry, when you return, victorious or empty-handed. This trust in the home is a mental foundation that frees the hunter to focus entirely on the dangerous task ahead. You walk for hours, silent, efficient. The landscape is immense and white, a blinding mirror reflecting the silver sun. The only sound is the slight crunch of your snowshoes and the rhythmic breathing of the men around you. You are moving toward the river bottom, where cottonwood trees provide wood, and the terrain is rougher, providing shelter for the herd. You are tracking, reading the snow with the practiced eye of an ancestral scholar. You spot them, Tatanka, the great bison, hundreds of them, gathered for warmth, digging through the snow with their massive heads to reach the dry grass beneath. They are black silhouettes against the white canvas, radiating heat. You approach carefully, using the terrain, becoming one with the earth. You and your companions choose your targets. The weak, the old, the isolated, the necessary rule of respect. The hunt is fast, brutal, and essential. You feel the power of the buffalo beneath you as you fire the arrow, the last, perfect action of a warrior who respects the life he is taking. The animal falls. The moment of death is solemn, not joyous. You kneel, whispering the ancient prayer of thanks, taking a moment of silence for the gift. The work begins. Immediately, you butcher the animal quickly and efficiently, using every single part. The meat, the organs, the sinew, the fat, the bone, and the massive hide. The hides are the most valuable resource. The building blocks of your home. The fresh, thick hide is a massive weight, a necessary burden. You load the sleds, and the journey back begins. You return to the village at sunset, exhausted, your clothes smelling of blood and triumph. The sight of the village, dozens of cones smoking gently in the twilight, is the most comforting sight in the world. You know the warmth is waiting. You crawl back into your teepee. The fire is still burning low. The day's cold is washed away by the enveloping warmth. You are home. The hide is immediately brought inside, placed near the door to begin the long, careful process of curing and tanning. This hide will become a new robe for a child, or a patch for a wall, ensuring the machine of survival continues to function flawlessly for another year. The women begin cooking, filling the air with the smell of rich, savory stew. You sit by the fire, watching the steam rise. You feel the deep satisfaction of the hunter who has provided for his family, the man who has lived up to the trust placed in him by the tribe and the ancestors. You are warm, you are full, you are safe. The simple engineering of the tepi has once again defeated the relentless cold of the Great Plains. This is not just survival. This is living in perfect harmony with the brutal beauty of the world. Let the images of the snow-covered teepee, the clean, circulating air, and the warmth of the fire fill your mind. Let the deep wisdom of the ancestral engineers, who perfected the art of autonomous living, guide your breathing. You are completely safe inside this perfectly designed cone. There is no wind, no hunger, no fear, only the sound of the embers and the profound quiet of the wilderness. Sleep well, my friend.